All right, Julia.
Not for a good thing.
This is obviously a story we'll talk a lot more about. It's good to have your input on it today. That's Julia Hartley-Moore. We are going to talk about housing, because I think we've got time to. Auckland and Queenstown, cool. Dunedin, Central Otago, the Mackenzie Country. Nelson, Wellington, Napier, Invercargill are heating up. These property stats came through earlier in the week, but we wonder what they signify exactly. Any thoughts? Any thoughts? You've probably looked at the places that are on the rise, some of them quite substantially, and the places that are not, like Auckland. Any thoughts?
Well, this issue is so difficult because at any time we have developments which were started years ago, which come through. There's such a lengthy time lag between consents, development, having residences ready for occupation, that it's very easy to read the figures very superficially. There's no doubt that post-election there was a lot of uncertainty. We saw it in the business community, and I think we saw it in the housing market as well. People didn't know what was going to happen, so they weren't jumping into anything. They weren't sure what's going to happen to interest rates and that sort of thing. So I don't think our housing in New Zealand is going to be materially different in the future, except that there will be a lot of homes that people have been working on for years that will come on stream. And when those come on stream, people will say, oh, great, there's more houses out there, the price is going to go down. But in fact, those residences could well have been 5 years.
All right, so you're not seeing a tide turning, a long-term exodus from Auckland. You're figuring this is just temporary.
Auckland will continue growing,
okay,
whether people like it or not. And you can't draw boundaries around an area, and you can't say no more can come in, because that's just impractical, and it doesn't work.
I want to get to Dunedin, which is a hot housing market, and Richard Stringer is the sales manager at Harcourts down there. Hello, Richard.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Why Dunedin, Richard? Why now? What do you think's happening?
It actually goes back a couple of years. We had the perfect storm for Dunedin with two policy adjustments. Firstly was the change in the LVR to a 40% deposit. That played into the hands of Dunedin. We had a lot of investment from Auckland, from Central Otago, where investors had a lot more equity in their property there, so 40% was easier to find with our values here in Dunedin. And at the same time, they changed the KiwiSaver threshold, lifted that to $400,000 for homes in Dunedin.
Okay, so that helped. But there must be something else going on in terms of either glamour or you've become the investor's favourite. What is it?
Glamour. Well, I'm not sure about the glamour part of it, but look, it's a good city. We are attracting young first-time buyers and young families out of not so much Auckland, but some of the areas surrounding Auckland. We've seen buyers from Hamilton, from the Waikato region in general. It's quite interesting to see those people turning up in Dunedin, and they're looking for an easier start into the property ladder. There's plenty of good employment opportunities down here. There's been a lot of investment in the tech sector and
excellent.
IT
I'm
business.
sorry to run out of time with you. Long may that remain and improve. That's Richard Stringer. Verity, thank you very much for being on the panel today. Lovely to have your company.
Thanks, Jim.
Verity Johnson and Michelle Bogue.
A pleasure, as always.
Have fun tonight, and we are back tomorrow. Checkpoint on the way with John Campbell. Thanks, everybody.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight on Checkpoint, the Christchurch homeowners who say nobody even looked under the floorboards when assessing earthquake damage. A family who are in the top 10 most urgent cases after the quake tell us about their 3 botched repairs and 400 defects. And EQC tells us what they're going to do about it.
I've had legal advice, and the advice that I've received is that Fletchers do have a liability.
What liability have you been told Fletchers have?
Fletchers have liability from the point of view of delivering the services of a PMO, and that's what we'll be looking at.
That interview coming up. In it, EQC Sid Miller also responds to the very many stories we've had from EQC clients on Checkpoint over the past couple of weeks.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. 120 tourists are trapped by slips in a remote part of Whanganui district, while in Hawke's Bay heavy rain has caused flooding and evacuations. A spokesperson for the Manawatu Whanganui Regional Council says a helicopter has delivered supplies and an emergency generator to Blue Duck Station at Whakahoro, 43 kilometres west of Raurimu. He says the tourists will be stuck overnight. Meanwhile, in Hawke's Bay, about 200 people were evacuated after the Esk River breached its banks. Hawke's Bay Emergency Management's Ian McDonald says people were also evacuated from a boarding school after 300 millimetres of rain fell overnight. Up to 90 more millimetres is due to fall in the next 8 hours, but Mr McDonald says it's unlikely to cause further major problems. A man forced to leave a Hawke's Bay campground this morning says they were able to get out just before the Esk River burst its banks. About 30 residents of the Eskdale Holiday Park near Napier have since returned home to find the place strewn in mud and debris. Bailey Salter says he woke up at 6 o'clock to heavy rain but didn't realise how bad the situation was until the camp manager told him he had to leave.
I looked at the river and it was just about to burst that bank. So we just went round and packed up everyone's caravans, and we were just finished mine as it burst that bank, and it maybe got to here in less than 20 minutes.
Bailey Salter. Flooding and slips closed state highways and roads across the central North Island from Hawke's Bay to Whanganui, New Plymouth and Wairarapa today. However, all roads except State Highway 43 between Whangamomona and Taumaranui have now reopened. The head of EQC says it has sought legal advice on the extent of Fletcher Construction's liability for substandard repair work after the Christchurch earthquakes. Sid Miller has told Checkpoint the advice he's received is that Fletchers do have a liability. The Earthquake Commission will now look at what Mr Miller called the various options. Earlier this week, Checkpoint revealed the contract between EQC and Fletchers contained an indemnity against liability for the construction company. Fletcher's former CEO told the program there are no grounds for a case against them, but EQC is now assessing Fletcher's liability as a project management office. That interview will be on Checkpoint after the news. Missing Auckland woman Tanya Elwood has been confirmed as one of the bodies found at a Grey Lynn boarding house. The police say they've completed the post-mortem for 39-year-old Miss Elwood and 36-year-old Timothy Kerr Hamilton, who were found at Dryden Lodge 2 days ago. Jessie Chang reports.
The police were called to the boarding house on Tuesday after 2 bodies were found in one of the rooms. Residents who spoke to RNZ say Ms Elwood and Mr Hamilton hadn't been at the lodge for very long. Ms Elwood has been missing for more than a week. The police say Ms Elwood and Mr Hamilton knew each other and they aren't looking for anyone else in relation to their deaths. They say they are still piecing together what happened and would like to hear from anyone who had contact with them in the days before they died. Ko Jessie Chang, TNA.
The erosion of coastal tracks in the Abel Tasman National Parks means some might have to be moved further inland. Andrew Lamison, who heads the Department of Conservation's Golden Bay office, says slips at the northern head of the park have closed the track there and forced a rethink on future management. He says geotech reports linked the slips to the storm surge generated by Cyclone Fahey about 6 weeks ago. Mr Lamison says it's possible the tracks vulnerable to erosion from the sea will have to be cut further inland. By the end of this summer season, 250,000 people are expected to have visited the park this year alone. Mayors from around the country say they need to be able to set some rules of their own as they figure out how to deal with freedom campers. Today, Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis had a meeting with more than 30 mayors in Wellington as local government New Zealand says the problem is reaching crisis point. President Dave Cull says tourists are an important part of the economy and local and central government need to work together.
There still needs to be a recognition that local communities need to have control, for instance, of where they will allow people to camp responsibly and where they won't. And that needs to reside locally.
Dave Cull says a user pay system could allow communities to install toilets and showers for freedom campers. It's 5:04. Sport, the White Ferns are cruising towards victory in the second one-day cricket international against the West Indies at Lincoln. Chasing 195, the New Zealanders are 175 for 1 after 29 overs. Sophie Devine made 80 while Susie Bates is on 92. Meanwhile, the Black Caps coach Mike Hesson has hailed Ross Taylor's match-winning century against England as one of the great one-day hundreds of the game. A hobbling and injured Taylor anchored the New Zealand innings with an unbeaten 181 to guide New Zealand to victory and level the 5-match series at 2 games all. Hesson says there's no doubt about the quality of Taylor's performance.
I think the context of it, not only a big score, the fact he's coming at 2 for 2. You know, Ross, he's got some very, very good hundreds for us, but that was, you know, you don't use the word great often, but that was a great 100. And I think any side in the world, that would be considered a great innings.
Black Caps coach Mike Hesson. A decision on Taylor's participation in Saturday's decider in Christchurch will be made after training tomorrow. All Black flanker Matt Todd returns to the Crusaders' starting lineup for Saturday night's Super Rugby game against the Hurricanes in Wellington. Todd returns to the open side, having recovered from the thumb injury, which kept him out of the Stormers match last week. Meanwhile, the Hurricanes have named an unchanged 15, meaning first 5 Bowden Barrett and prop Ben May will play their 100th Super Rugby games. That's the news.
A nerve agent attack.
It has now developed into a major international incident with huge political ramifications and really quite terrifying facts.
A toxic fire.
What's coming off the pile is more steam than anything. Every now and again there's a little bit of a flare up as they break into some hot spots.
A space station plummets to Earth.
If this thing does land next to you, right, stand 100 yards away from it. You'll be fine. Just don't go up to it and sniff it.
All the elements. Morning Report, weekdays from 6.
Then on 9 to noon, the New Zealand woman tackling sexual harassment at the United Nations. And after 10, from helping to establish many of our protected parks to consulting over disputed international borders, we meet New Zealand's former Surveyor General, Bill Robertson. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Taumaranui and Gisborne. Fine spells and scattered showers today with possible thunderstorms, mainly fine tomorrow but rain around Gisborne. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms in Hawke's Bay, easing to showers tomorrow. Taranaki to Kapiti coast, including Taihape. Scattered rain, some heavy north of Manawatu, becoming confined to Taihape tomorrow afternoon. Wellington, occasional showers. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine, however occasional rain about the Sounds and Golden Bay today. Bulla to Fiordland, fine apart from showers in northern Bulla tomorrow. Canterbury and Kaikoura coast, cloud increasing and showers developing tomorrow morning, easing in the afternoon. Otago and Southland, fine spells, a few showers spreading from the south this evening and tomorrow morning, clearing tomorrow afternoon. And the Chatham Islands, rain easing to showers tomorrow. It's exactly 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Exactly. Thanks, Katrina Batten. Appreciate it. Yes, we're going to look at the weather coming up. Heavy rain and flooding in and around Whanganui and more rain on the way for Wairarapa, the Tararua district and Hawke's Bay. We'll have the latest shortly. Plus later in the program, Ross Taylor talks to me while posing for selfie after selfie at Dunedin Airport. But first, the head of EQC says they've sought legal advice on the extent of Fletcher Construction's liability for any substandard repair work after the Christchurch earthquakes. Sid Miller told us that a short time ago. He also told us EQC is now assessing Fletcher's liability as a project management office. That's a major development after a week of interviews on Checkpoint in which we revealed the contract between EQC and Fletcher's contained an indemnity against liability for the construction company and in which the National Party's new EQC spokesperson suggested EQC should sue Fletcher's if there is an overwhelming amount of substandard work. Tonight we reveal how many cases against EQC are before the courts, and it's quite a lot, and we do it all in an interview with EQC CEO Sid Miller. Speaking to us for the first time since he took over the job from Ian Simpson last February, we begin with Mr Miller listening to the experiences of 4 of the many EQC clients we've spoken to on Checkpoint over the past fortnight.
EQC turned up when they had finished. I raised concerns about there being liquefaction under the house, and he told me that he had looked under the floor and that there was no liquefaction under there. That surprised me because the access to the underfloor area was in a cupboard under the stairs, and I was in a position to see that nobody had even been into that cupboard, let alone looked under the floor. So I asked him how he had determined that there was no liquefaction under the floor, and he told me that he had looked down the manhole and had shone his torch around thoroughly, and that's how he determined. And I just said to him, "You're a liar." And he sort of looked shocked at me. And I said to him, "You're a liar, because if you'd looked under the floor, you would have noted that there is black polythene that we put on the ground under the house prior to the earthquakes. And you can't actually see whether there's liquefaction under there unless you climb under the house, lift the black polythene and have a look." And I said, "And I know that you didn't go under the house."
During the inspections and all the time I was with the EQC, nobody ever looked at the underfloor. When they were inspecting the damage, they did not inspect under the floor. When they were inspecting for land damage, they did not look under the floor until I complained and got a review. When the reviewer came out, he got under the house, came up and saying, "Oh, there's hardly anything there, barely half a bucket." I consequently received a letter saying that he saw only 0.01 cubic metres of silt under the house, and it was costed at $2.05 to remove. My insurance company, as a result of negotiations with my lawyer, put a critter under the house which not only showed a lot of damage, broken bearers, parted bearers, cracks round the foundation, tilted piles, etc., but masses of silt inundation under the house.
It took 3 years and going through 8 different people to finally get an engineer to say that the damage to the foundations was earthquake related. Mostly they just did very casual inspections, sketches on bits of paper of what the rooms were like, very basic notes about cracks in the walls. No attention was made to the floors at all at the time. It was incredibly frustrating because I actually used the term in one of my emails, like, "Are you calling me a liar about how my house was like before the quakes?" And it was really disheartening that the government-run organisation could be doing this to me or to anybody. We didn't really push our repair for several years because we thought we trusted the process and the government to look after us. But it wasn't until this started to happen that we realised that they were not on our side. Bits of the house has now started to rot. We haven't been able to do maintenance that you would usually do on a property over that sort of period of time to keep it up to spec. And that's a bit sad, do you know what I mean? We won't be able to use 2 whole rooms of our house properly because of the state that it's now in.
You can look under our house from a trapdoor. They did stick their head in under the house, shine a torch round, and from that site you could actually see that there were at least 2 piles collapsed and that there were at least 4 piles that had completely lost their footing because of land damage, because of the slope having moved. And they just ignored that. So they were putting to jack and pack piles that had actually fallen over. So that was the joint review between EQC and Southern Response. And they ignored the cracks in the foundation. They said it could just be epoxied. And they ignored all the framing damage to the house. We went from being a rebuild to being under cap, and then had to fight to get away from EQC. And since then, we've been stuck with Southern Response in this maze of delay and denial.
And they are just some of the people we have been speaking to and have heard from over the past few weeks. Sid Miller, CEO of EQC, thank you so much for joining us on Checkpoint, and thank you for listening to those people. What do you say to them?
It's very distressing, John. Very distressing to hear that and what they've been through. We need to address these problems, and I think what I want to do is make sure we hear from all of these people. I want to make sure that we can, address the outstanding claims that we've got, and where people maybe have issues themselves that they've not actually submitted that they're aware of, is please come to us. We have to solve these issues.
Yes, and I think everyone listening will immediately be comforted by your determination to listen to them. But I want to ask you, how many cases is EQC currently defending in the District Court, the High Court or the Appeal Court, or preparing to defend from claimants like the people we just heard from?
We have 316 open litigation cases at the minute, of which I think 58 are in the district court and 257 are in the High Court and 1 is in Court of Appeal.
Can you give me the overall number? 300 and how many?
316.
So you want to listen at the same time as you have 316 claims in court?
We have to resolve the open claims that we have got, and those claims that I've just talked to you there about in litigation. What we've got to do is try and find a settlement for those people there as well. So I'm very much focused on dealing with that 2,600 that I know you're well aware of, but also dealing with those in litigation as well. So how can we find a route through those? And so that's our overall focus. Is everybody who's in these positions in terms of trying to get their claims resolved is where we are focusing. But I take your point. It's not a space we want to be. So I absolutely agree with you. It is time that we look for different resolutions for these people.
What we're talking about here is work that was either done and disputed or wasn't done. And a lot of that goes back to the original scopes, doesn't it? And you will know that on Checkpoint over the past week or two, we've been looking at the fragility, the flaws, the omissions of many of the original scopes. How big a problem do you think that was?
It's hard to know how big a problem it was, when I look at this. But I know there was initial sort of rapid assessment done, which was very much about checking whether houses were safe and people could live in those. We then went into a process of further scoping completed by certified builders, and then working with the contractors and then even the customers themselves to understand was all the scope being covered, and how did we could get sort of a constantly iterative process to get variations to that statement of work to deal with damage as we got deeper and deeper into the repairs. So I think there was a process in place there that was followed. But there's clearly... Forgive me for interrupting, because
I'm determined I'm not going to interrupt during this interview, because we really are delighted to hear from you. There was a process that was followed. What does that mean? Because you see, what we're hearing is that those initial scopes, and everyone knows the pressure that was on you in that period post-2011, February 2011, there was 180,000 scopes done in 4 months. It was unbelievable. But what we are hearing from Fletchers, who of course ran the Canterbury Home Repair Program, and from senior managers within the Canterbury Home Repair Program, is that the scopes became binding in a way, that it was very difficult for people who had been scoped to get the extent of their damage reconsidered. Now, what we are talking about now is a whole lot of people who think they were repaired, who had cosmetic repairs done and have no idea what is lurking in the foundations beneath their floors, right?
Can I say to those people then, if you have concerns, please contact us. Your claim remains open with us. We will come back and we need to have a look at what is concerning people. What are they actually finding? What is it we're not seeing? And so that's where I encourage people to please contact us. And some of the things that I'm looking at are. Do we need a separate line call line that people can contact us on? In terms of, we have our info at eqc.gov.nz, and I'm quite happy there. If they want to put on the subject line Checkpoint, please contact us. I want to solve these issues for people.
What are we looking at most of all, do you think? Is it the pre-1970 rubble foundations, which... And there are lots of new homes in Christchurch. So let's say that they are in roughly a half to 2/3 of the property stock that existed prior to the 2011 earthquakes. Those foundations are most vulnerable, aren't they?
I couldn't comment on that, John. I don't have that level of technical detail. What I can tell you, of the 2,600, we have 1,273 that are in the re-repair category.
And 1,273, and the re-repairs are mostly to foundations, would it be fair to say?
I wouldn't know. I couldn't comment on what the ratio. There'll be some will be foundations, but some will be. There could be walls. There could be. I don't know. I can get that for you, but I don't have that to my fingertips, I'm afraid.
Right. But the issue again is we may simply not know how many foundations need repair work until people find that out themselves. That may be years from now. Onsolds are providing a striking example of that. That is people who bought properties in which the EQC scope repairs were actually done. There was paperwork to say that, and they've only found out subsequently, as new owners of the homes, that the foundations weren't scoped and therefore weren't repaired.
I think the Onsold situation is a very complex legal situation, both with ourselves, with the private insurers, and I know this is one of the areas that the Minister has specifically asked for resource to be dedicated to, so that she can seek a declaratory judgment, because we need to find a solution through this. We continue to pay to our liability, but absolutely understand your point and the people that are left with this problem. So we've got to find a solution for this, and that's the reason we're looking for that. We're working to support the Minister around this declaratory judgment.
You say that you continue to pay to your liability. Is there a increasing reluctance from insurers to do the same thing?
The insurers are adopting their own position in this space. So this is, where people are finding themselves is a challenge for the whole.
But what's really interesting is that
industry.
Yeah, but what's really interesting is that if your original scope was under cap, and then you find new damage right in the foundations, then you go over cap. So suddenly the insurers are going to start getting people onsolds. Who they had no expectation whatsoever of dealing with. And we have IAG and Southern Response both having limitation periods on claims, which mean that all claims must be in this year.
Yep, and that's why we need to urgently seek this declaratory judgment to sort this out. We've got a big legal issue here, which we've got to clarify for people so they can get certainty in terms of where they stand.
Where are you at with that legal issue? Where are you at with that declaratory judgment?
We're working through that.
Jerry Brownlee and his replacement as EQC spokesperson for the National Party say Fletchers are liable for all of this and EQC should consider taking action against them. Are you?
I've had legal advice, and the advice that I've received is that Fletchers do have a liability. And I'm going to pursue this in terms of looking at the various options. Now, Fletchers were operating a project management office. We had the relationship with the contractors. But their obligations around running the project management office, I want to understand that a lot more and what the legal ramifications of that are. So I am pursuing options in that space, yes.
I want you to clarify that. You are pursuing options that may involve taking legal action against Fletchers.
They might do in due course, but I don't want to prejudice our position today.
What liability have you been told Fletchers have?
Fletchers have liability from the point of view of delivering the services of a PMO.
But there are so many exclusions in the PMO, aren't there? FCC is not responsible for A, the design of the works, B, the construction of any works, C, work of any contractor or consultant or the goods or services supplied by any merchants.
John, the legal advice I've had is Fletchers have an obligation in terms of delivering their services as a PMO, and that's what we'll be looking at.
Yes, Fletchers and EQC, the buck stops where, I guess, is the question. This seems a very good time to bring in another customer of EQC and then of Fletchers through the Canterbury Home Repair Program. Her name is Catherine Adair. She was pregnant in February 2011 when that big quake struck. Their roof leaked. They were considered highly vulnerable and they were made a high priority case for repairs, as was appropriate, obviously. Thank you for listening to her, Mr. Miller. This 7 years on is where Catherine Adair stands now.
Right now we have a house that is not compliant. It never had any of its council checks done while they were doing the repair. We have been through this huge fight with EQC where they've changed scope time and time again. We've had 3 repairs done to this property. We've moved out twice, and we're still in a situation where we have 400 points of defect. The foundation, the walls, the windows, the roof, the brick cladding, the plastering, the painting, the flooring, and none of them are up to trade standards, and we don't have compliance. We have health and safety risks. We have a fire that blows smoke into the room, and it also has air flowing into the room as well, so it's cold and drafty, and it is unusable.
What did your first scope say? So back in 2011, when you were in that top priority queue because you were pregnant and your roof was leaking, what did your first scope say, EQC scope?
So our first scope said that they would do a full underpin and also do some of the do the work within the cosmetic areas of the house as well, and replace the bricks.
So that must have put you over cap, did it?
Well, no, there was no mention of it ever being over cap until the second repair. Just before the second repair, after we at the signing of the scope meeting where we were agreeing what they were going to do, they said to us, you know, you are over cap. However, we would recommend to you that you stay with us because we have it in our best interest, because we've had so many delays, that you should stay with us and we will repair your house. We don't think that you will do any better, and maybe you'll do worse with your insurer. And we don't want you to wait another year before the insurer could repair your house.
And when did they say that to you, Catherine?
This was just before we were about to move out for the second major repair to our home.
And so you are still waiting for EQC to honour that 2 years on?
Well, we did move out. As I say, we moved out for the repair, but we've moved back in after the repair, but as I say, we now have no code of compliance. We've got these 400 points of defects, and there are these health and safety concerns. We've got 3 young children, 6, 3.5 and 10 months. We can't use our fire. There were screws and nails and building site material left around our property, which the children weren't able to go outside. Yeah.
This has been your life for 7 years.
This is what we've been doing. John, I have to emphasise the bullying. They bullied us the whole way through.
When you say they, who, Catherine?
Fletchers and EQC.
And how did the bullying, how were you bullied?
They threatened to cash settle us if we didn't agree with what they were doing. They said if there was a consent, in terms of the fire, right before Christmas, they said, no, you definitely don't need a consent to put a new chimney in your home. We said, I'm pretty sure you do. Then they agreed that, yes, you did, and we asked that they show us the consent before it goes to council because we knew that they could get it wrong. They didn't give it to us. We got the consent from the council. They'd used the incorrect template. It wasn't our house. They then said to us at that time, if you delay this any further, this work, you will be liable for your rent that we are paying for you at the moment, and you'll be liable for the length of time it takes because of to pay for the scaffolding.
What has been the impact of this on you and your family?
Well, we trusted them. We trusted the process. They said they would fix it. They said they had the right people to do the work, the right professionals, had the right skills. They said, you have to give over everything to us. We will manage this. You're not to be involved in your house repair. And we've lost everything. It's got no compliance. It has no value. It's a damaged home. It's a health and safety risk for our children. We've been bullied to the point where it's traumatised. It's actually a sense of trauma. We feel anxious when EQC contact us or when they come to our home to do assessments. We have flashbacks. It's used our energy, which we would have preferred, and our money. We'd prefer to have spent that with our family. and we have a sense of exhaustion and apathy. And personally, it's made me lose trust in my country. I have no pride in New Zealand.
That's Catherine Adair speaking to us at some length. Mr. Miller, we really appreciate you sticking with us, and we really appreciate you listening to that. And the word that people will have fixed upon, I think, is that they feel bullied by EQC. But the one that I think sums up the tone of so many people we have heard from over the past few weeks, and actually years of doing this work, is that she feels anxious every time she deals with EQC. Is it okay that she feels that way?
John, that was absolutely horrible to hear. And it's just simply not on. People should be able to trust us, and we have to address that. It's dreadful that she is anxious. And look, I'm not going to be able to solve it now, but if she's happy to share her details with you, then if you could please
absolutely
pass those on, and we'll contact her. I think I'd like to thank you for bringing issues like this to the fore. We have to resolve these, and we have to address these issues for people. It's just simply not on.
Yes, and that's what you exist to do, right? And so there are roughly 2,500 re-repairs or people who are ongoing in terms of their pursuit of resolution or settlement with EQC. There are people going through the courts in over 300 cases. When will this be over, do you think?
One of the targets that I put on myself and the team is that of the 2,600, all those that came in before March of last year, which is about 700, I want to have resolved by the end of June. And then in terms of the other repairs, what I want to do is I want to give people certainty that when they do have a claim that's reopened, that they have a timescale by which they know they're going to get a settlement, or at least know how that settlement's going to be resolved, so that I can return some faith in the system. And so they are our key targets we're working to deliver the change. In addition to that is also ensuring that where we do settlements, they meet the satisfaction of the customers from the point of view of not being reopened. So, it's important both what we do but how we do it. So that's what I put in place. That's what I'm holding myself accountable to the board and my team as well. And that's very much our focus for this year.
That was Sid Miller, of course, the CEO of EQC since February of last year. Ian Simpson in the period prior to that from the earthquakes. Coming up before 6, just how widespread is spying on earthquake claimants? A Christchurch homeowner whose Facebook posts were monitored and shared by his insurer. We will be looking at that. The Department of Conservation fights a losing battle repairing tracks eroded by the sea in parts of the Abel Tasman National Park. And Ross Taylor on his highest ever match-winning knock. All of that before 6. A lot of feedback coming in from Christchurch, including from people who say we aren't even in court yet, but we are heading there. 316 cases against EQC before the courts. Nona next with business news, but before it all, Katrina with the headlines.
Flood barriers have been deployed in Whanganui and a watch is in place for the Manawatu River. The barriers were activated as a precautionary measure. Craig Grant from the Manawatu Whanganui Regional Council says Whanganui river levels are expected to peak at over 10 metres within the next hour. He says the watch on the Manawatu River will continue overnight. Thunderstorms and heavy rain will continue overnight in the central North Island. Up to 322 millimetres of rain has fallen in Hawke's Bay in the past 24 hours, and thunderstorms will bring further downpours tonight. Heavy showers and thunderstorms are forecast in the Central Plateau and Waikato areas, while Northland, Auckland and Coromandel can expect heavy rain. The severe weather will ease tomorrow. The head of the Earthquake Commission says it has got legal advice on the extent of Fletcher Construction's liability for substandard repair work after the Christchurch earthquakes. Sid Miller has told Checkpoint the advice he's received is that Fletchers do have a liability despite the construction company's contract with EQC containing an indemnity against liability. The body of an Auckland woman missing for more than a week has been identified as one of those found at a Greyland boarding house 2 days ago. The police say they've completed the post-mortem for 39-year-old Tanya Elwood and 36-year-old Timothy Kerr Hamilton, who were found at Dryden Lodge. One person has died following a crash between a car and a motorcycle on State Highway 3 in the Waitomo district. The police say they were called to the scene near Awakino just before 3:30 this afternoon. The road is closed and diversions are in place. The New Zealand women cricketers have secured the one-day series against the West Indies after scoring an emphatic 8-wicket win in the second international at Lincoln. The Windies were bowled out for 194 in the 49th over, with the White Ferns chasing down their target with 19 overs to spare. Those are the headlines. That's good news to end them.
It is 19 overs. They cruised in, yeah.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I'll be back at 6.
Thanks, Katrina. Talking of cricket, Ross Taylor joins us before 6, but let's go to business news now. Nona Peltier. Hi, Nona.
Hello. I thought you wanted me to talk about cricket for a second.
No.
Good.
No.
That's
No, we'll get you to talk about the warehouse instead, right? Is that
That's a good one. Let's talk about them. Yeah, they're the country's largest retailer, as if we didn't know that. But anyway, they made a better first half profit, and that's after they sold that financial services business that was a real drag on their company. So that's gone. The company made nearly $32 million, and the market was pretty happy about that. Their share price rose 0.5%, $2.03. Now, the company also talked about its strategy, so it's revamping the company, and they've got a chief executive there, Nick Grayston is his name.
Wait a sec. The share price rose 0.5%.
Yep.
So $2. So a percent is 2 cents. So 0.5% went up a cent.
Yes, as a matter of fact.
well, put the champagne away. It went up a cent, Nona.
I'm so glad that you could do maths. I'm very excited about that.
Bloody hell.
I won't bother with these numbers. I'll just sort of throw them at you, and then you can do the calculations in your head. Very good.
Thanks, Nona.
Well, anyway, what was I saying?
I don't know.
Yeah, the company, they've been revamping their strategy so that they can get more profit in the future, because they were having a hard time getting growth. You know, retailers have been struggling just generally, greater competition online. So this company has been revamping their strategy. They're decided that they needed to move away from, you know, some of the strategies they used in the past. And anyway, I had a chat with the chief executive, Nick Grayston, earlier today. And he talked about everyday low pricing, for short, EDLP. Of course, we have to have some jargon there. Anyways, it's one of the examples that they have of the things they're trying to do, and we have a little bit of him talking.
One of the reasons why we moved to EDLP and red, for example, was that the high-low trading cadence is intrinsically inefficient. The breadth of inventory and the continual rotation and marking down of prices is inefficient from a marketing point of view because of the instrument that you use to drive that behavior. It also causes a lot of store labor because you're always changing prices, moving the product around, you're handling, up to 4 times the breadth of assortment. You'll see an intensification of this real sort of hardcore pick and shovel work to fix the retail fundamentals.
And that's the chief executive of the warehouse, Nick Grayston.
You've also been looking at restaurant brands, right? Yeah. Strong sales, up by how much, Nona?
Well, you know what? They were up quite a lot, 49%.
Yeah, wow.
That's pretty good to the year. So that's what, $741 million. And so they're getting close to that target they have of $1 billion, and that's probably because, you know, they've got these they've expanded into the Pacific and Australia, New Zealand, and I think they're still on a growth path, but people love their chicken, you know.
Yeah, that's big growth, isn't it?
Yeah. Anyway, so their share price fell 1%. Don't ask me why, to $7.12.
Okay, so actually in cents terms, that was actually meaningful.
That was a bit more meaningful. Thank you very much for that.
What happened on the markets today?
Yeah, well, the NZX Top 50 Index, it rose nearly 1%, and that's mostly not because of these companies, no, because of the U.S. moderating their stance on trade tariffs.
Right.
And so they rose nearly 1%. That's 74 points to 8,359. And the Kiwi dollar, 72.9, which is basically where it was yesterday, 93 Australian and 52.4 pence.
Nona Peltier, thank you very much indeed. Let's look at this weather now. More than 100 tourists are trapped at a resort in Whanganui because of slips after heavy rain overnight. Meanwhile, more rain is on the way for Wairarapa, the Tararua district, and Hawke's Bay, where flooding and slips have closed roads and prompted about 200 people to evacuate from homes and campgrounds. Our Hawke's Bay reporter, Anusha Bradley, hitched a ride into the flood-struck settlement of Estdale, which is just north of Napier, of course, and filed this report.
30 people were evacuated early this morning from the Eskdale Holiday Park just north of Napier, and residents returning this afternoon found it strewn with debris, mud and silt. Campground resident Arthur Yarnold was woken at 6:30 this morning with a warning that Esk River was about to breach its banks.
So we sort of started to organise ourselves and what have you, and waited a little while, but we could just see it creeping up, and then when it got probably just before this levee bank, we decided we'd evacuate and move.
His neighbour, Bailey Salter, says he didn't realise how bad the situation was until the camp manager told him to leave.
I actually woke up at 6 o'clock this morning and didn't really think much of it. I just heard, the rain and thunder and lightning. I was on my way driving out of the camp as Daniel, the camp manager, just told me, no, go pack up your things. And it wasn't until I got back to my caravan, which was down there, that I looked at the river and it was just about to burst that bank. So we just went round and packed up everyone's caravans, and we were just finished mine as it burst that bank. And it maybe got to here in less than 20 minutes.
He says the force of the waist-high water moved trees and debris throughout the campground.
The cabin there was kind of situated just behind the water tank, and due to the water it's just been picked up and thrown to the fence line.
The last time this campground was flooded was when Cyclone Bowler hit exactly 30 years ago today, in what is still the country's most devastating and costly storm. The campground owner, Daniel Gale, remembers it well.
Yeah, when I was 6 years old, it flooded in Cyclone Bowler. It's never flooded since. This is way different to Bowler. This happened over 12 hours. Bowler took 3 days. There's not as much silt as Bowler. There's a lot more forestry around, which is good. But yeah, it's going to take a while to clean up, that's for sure.
The Hukarere Girls' School just up the road also chose to leave this morning, as have some residents in the Esk Valley area and in Pātoka. And students from Havelock North Intermediate were also evacuated from their school camp in Rissington. Principal Julia Beaumont says more than 60 students were affected.
They were sleeping in tents, everything was good, until about midnight when the rain really picked up. And so this morning the teachers just decided, with the worsening weather, that it was time to just come home.
People living near the Esk River catchment are being advised to prepare to leave if necessary, because more heavy rainfall is forecast to fall tonight and tomorrow. A Met Service forecaster, Tom Adams, says the heaviest rainfall so far have been inland in central Hawke's Bay due to a very slow-moving front bringing thunderstorms.
There's a station near Glengarry, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council station, which has seen over 322 millimetres of rain in the last 24 hours, and the vast bulk of that has been this morning.
As much as 90 millimetres more rain is due to fall before 1 o'clock this morning, but the head of Hawke's Bay Emergency Management, Ian McDonald, says it's unlikely to cause further major problems unless it comes all at once.
We've had some properties have been flooded. I'm aware of at least 2 or 3. But what we're doing at the moment is we're ringing around all of those properties that were in that area, that were in the inundation area, and finding out where they are at in terms of their properties.
Many of the roads closed across the central North Island have now reopened. NZTA's Regional Transport Manager Ross Ironson says State Highway 43 between Whangamomona and Taumaranui is still closed due to slips.
Some of the slips are quite large, and that road will be closed for some time. Obviously, as we clear one slip, we've got to move to the next, so we're not sure how many slips we have or just how big they are.
With high tide set to hit in a matter of hours, high river levels have already closed a number of roads in Whanganui. 120 tourists are trapped at Blue Duck Station near Ofango in Whanganui. A Horizons Regional Council spokesperson says the tourists will be stuck overnight and are currently without power and water. A helicopter has delivered supplies and an emergency generator to the isolated lodges. Heavy rain warnings remain in place for Hawke's Bay, south of Hastings, Wairarapa and Tararua district, where up to another 90 millimetres is set to fall before 1 o'clock tomorrow morning. But after that, it's set to ease, and the weekend is looking fine. In Napier for Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
British police have confirmed that a nerve agent was used to deliberately attack a former Russian spy and his daughter. Sergei and Yulia Skripal were found slumped outside a shopping centre in the city of Salisbury on Monday and are still critically ill in hospital. Dozens of police officers wearing protective clothing are now working at several sites in the city as they try and piece together the pair's movements. The BBC's Tom Simons with the latest.
Sergei Skripal was a man with a shadowy past. Relatives say he feared it would catch up with him, that he would be targeted. But he was using his own name, living a normal life, popping into a corner shop last month for milk and bacon. Tonight, he and his daughter are gravely ill. And now the police have revealed why.
In summary, this is being treated as a major incident involving attempted murder by administration of a nerve agent. As you know, these two people remain critically ill in hospital. Sadly, in addition, a police officer who was one of the first to attend the scene and respond to the incident is now also in a serious condition in hospital.
Counter-terrorism officers are being advised by public health agencies. They say there is no obvious outstanding risk. And they're trying to work out what the Skripals were doing in Salisbury after arriving at 1:30 on Sunday. Police are investigating reports that Sergei Skripal had lunch with a woman at the Zizi Italian restaurant, still cordoned off. They were behaving strangely. She had dark hair, resembled his daughter Yulia. But police have already seized CCTV footage from just before 4 p.m. A man and a blonde-haired woman heading towards the area where the Skripals were taken ill on a park bench. An eyewitness who saw that has already told us.
The girl looked quite young. She was pretty, blonde hair. To be honest, I couldn't see her face very well because she was leant onto him.
Blonde hair, dark hair. Detectives will need to sort through a mass of eyewitness reports and CCTV to establish the truth. The government was briefed on the inquiry today.
We need to keep a cool head and make sure that we collect all the evidence we can, and we need to make sure that we respond not to rumour but to all the evidence that they collect, and then we will need to decide what action to take.
But life in central Salisbury is now dominated by the response to the suspected poisoning. At lunchtime, a woman appeared to have been taken ill at the offices next to the Zizi restaurant. Police would not discuss why there was such a huge emergency response. But with 2 lives in jeopardy at the local hospital, it is clear why the risk has to be taken seriously.
Tom Simons reporting. Russia, of course, continues to insist it had nothing to do with the poisoning, saying any allegations against it are bogus. Last night on Checkpoint, we talked about Southern Response hiring a security contractor to spy on earthquake victims that were its clients. Tonight, we can reveal communication staff at AA Insurance monitor social media for criticism and then forward that criticism onto case managers so the complainants can be, quote, kept an eye on. Mike Dodge took to Facebook to complain about AA Insurance after what was then a 3.5-year battle in 2014. His post was screenshotted, shared internally, and then 2 months later he had a visit from a senior earthquake manager who was based in Auckland. Zach Fleming has more.
In November 2014, after 3.5 years fighting his insurer, AA, Mike Dodge did what many Cantabrians did, and what many still do. He went on social media and vented.
Funny, I have over 20 cracks in my foundation on TC2 land, and Geotech report says it's below the current standard, and AA downgraded the scope to Jack and Pack over being over cap. I'm trying to get it replaced after fighting them.
His comment received 1 like, but it was also spotted 760 kilometres away in Auckland by a senior corporate affairs staffer at AA Insurance, and she sent it to the company's earthquake reinstatement team leader.
Hi, would someone in your team be able to look up this customer?
The earthquake team leader looked up who Mike's case manager was and sent her an email, CCing in another corporate affairs manager.
Probably a good idea we look into / keep an eye on things. See below media activity.
That email was flagged as high importance. Mike's classified as a vulnerable client. His wife, Fran, has multiple sclerosis and is wheelchair bound.
They said we'd settle your claim early on in the piece because we're vulnerable. So I'm still 7 years and we're still vulnerable and we're still living in a broken house.
A key responsibility of AA Insurance's corporate affairs team, according to staff's current LinkedIn profiles, is to, quote, manage AA's social media presence and actively manage issues as they arise, advising on the best course of action to minimise reputational risk. So in Mike's case, we have staff whose job is to minimise reputational risk, sending his Facebook posts, which were critical of AA Insurance, to his case manager. Fast forward 3 months to February 2015, the Auckland-based earthquake team leader, who Mike had never heard of or heard from, knocks on his Christchurch door.
I was having discussions with the people that were trying to settle my claim via email and what have you quite strongly. And so at the time when they turned up, I believed he was there because of those conversations I'd had. It wasn't until later that I realised that may have been part of it, but I think more certain than not, it was because of those Facebook posts. They never mentioned anything. They just said, we believe you're having some difficulty with your claim and we're here to sort it out for you.
And for a little while, Mike stopped venting on Facebook because he thought he was making progress. The managing director of private investigator company Paragon, Ron McQuilter, says what AA Insurance did with Mike is exactly what he'd expect.
My advice would be do some inquiries to see if they're a serial blogger or a serial complainer, and if not, then look at the problem and go and, if you can, go in front of them, go and interview them, and see if you can sit down with them and solve the problem.
Right, just front it straight away and see if you can and get that criticisms to stop, basically.
Absolutely.
But hindsight shows Mike didn't get progress in exchange for his venting stopping.
So here we are, 3 years later, actually to the month almost, that they came here to try and sort it, and we've still got no further ahead.
Mike says he thinks the February 2015 visit was, at least in part, a way of getting him to shut up, to minimise AA Insurance's reputational risk.
Very angry. We were working through a settlement process, and they basically tried to come here and settle the agreement to keep me off Facebook without saying so. I think they were more concerned about their brand damage than they were settling my claim.
AA Insurance won't discuss Mike Dodge's case because it's before the courts. But it said in a statement it absolutely looks out for mentions of its company on public social media posts. It says those comments are circulated to the right people so it can try and resolve issues that its customers may have. It says that's pretty common practice and a responsible way of operating. For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
We turn now to sport, although at its best it defies that broad label and becomes about spirit and character. And yesterday that happened. It was a one-day cricket game, England against New Zealand. England 2-1 up in the best-of-5 series. England batting first, making 335. If you're not a cricket fan, that's a heap. New Zealand chasing, lost both of their openers for 0. If you're not a cricket fan, that's a disaster. And out came Ross Taylor, his body falling apart like a Christmas toy as Christmas Day wears on. The target so remote it was almost inconceivable. And he made 181 not out, his highest ever one-day international score, and somehow New Zealand got there bit by bit for one of the greatest one-day cricket victories seen in many years.
First and foremost, you've got to try and get yourself in and get a partnership and try and give ourselves a chance of getting close to the target anyway. But we're able to get a good partnership with Kane and then again with Tom Latham, and then we got close to the target and we're able to get across the line, which was good.
But did you have the audacity to think you could get even closer at 2 for 2, chasing, well north of 300? I mean, what were you thinking about what was possible as you walked out?
I think if you look at it as soon as you get out there, 300 is just too far away. It's probably more daunting. I just thought my first goal was to try and get myself in, get some runs, and then get to 10 overs, and just get those little goals along the way. It wasn't until we got to about 200 that I even thought we had a chance of winning. There's a lot of hard work goes in before that to get us into that position.
And when you thought you had a chance of winning, does that change how you approach the innings? Does perversely actually the pressure go on at that stage when you're in with a shot?
Probably a little bit. But at the same time, you just got to try and trust that you're making the right decision at the right time. I guess in hindsight, I think the injury probably, if anything, probably helped me out a little bit. And the fact that, I was either had to go off retired hurt or just get, or try and hit boundaries and get the odd single.
They were odd singles, weren't they? You weren't enjoying running.
No, because the funny thing is every now and then you would run a single and it wouldn't hurt, and then then the next time it would really hurt. So I don't know what's going on.
Yeah. You are a remarkable bugger. And I mean, I think of all the things we understand about you. Clearly, everyone who loves the game of cricket knows you're a brilliant cricketer. But I think what people are only just getting to grips with is how tenacious and singular you are as a character. You are, in your own quiet, understated way, tough, aren't you?
Well, I suppose probably my upbringing and the way I was raised, and coming from a little town, you got to be pretty strong character, and pretty resilient, and the family have had a big part to play in that. And coming from Marston, anyone gets too big for the boots, they get knocked down pretty quickly. So it's a trait that I would like to be, to continue to improve on and continue to do it. But at the end of the day, it's just who I am, and just being authentic to myself, I guess.
Resilient, that's the word, isn't it? It's a beautiful word. It's a great quality, and it's a role model quality, isn't it, in sports people? The ability to overcome and to keep on keeping on.
Yeah, I guess as a professional sportsman, you do have a lot of ups and downs, whether it's in performance or whether it's an injury. There's a lot of other things that can affect you on what's going on outside of cricket as well. So, the more how you deal with those situations, and if you come up with them again, hopefully you've learned from it and can be a better cricketer and a better person for it as well.
You talked about your upbringing in Masterton, and I know we've discussed this before, but I'm absolutely fascinated about your time at Wairarapa College and when you were playing cricket there, what you were dreaming of. Did you ever dream of anything as wonderful as this?
No, I think I would have been happy if I played one Test match, one ODI. I think, I just wanted to play for New Zealand, play for Central District. So were my big goals growing up. I had my posters of all Vittori and Astle and Fleming and, on the wall growing up, and was lucky enough to play with them all as well. So, no, I never dreamt that I would have half the career that I've had to date. But in saying that, I'm proud of what I've achieved, and hopefully I can achieve a lot more over the next few years.
Yeah, I love the use of the words to date. I mean, you're still a work in progress, aren't you? 17 Test centuries, 19 one-day internationals, averages in the late 40s in both forms of the game, and you are still playing, and you look at least as good as you've ever looked.
Yeah, I think, if anything, the ideal scenario for any professional athlete is to go out on their own terms and at the top of their game. And I'm getting a bit older. 34 is my birthday
today. Yeah, happy birthday!
And every time I wake up in the morning, it's just a little bit slower. So Thank you. Sorry, just getting people shaking my hand.
I bet you are. What's that feel like? I mean,
thank you.
Were you doing selfies, Ross?
Yeah. Obviously, they don't know I'm doing an interview.
That's all right, bro. It's
They probably think I'm just talking to my wife.
Where are you now? You're at Dunedin Airport. Where are you?
I'm just about to board.
Yeah, I had that sense that. And you're going to Christchurch. Have you got any chance of playing on Saturday? Is that a bloody cruel question to ask you?
No, I think I've got a little chance. But I'll find out more over the next little while. But I'll try my best and recover as well as I can and give myself the best chance to help the team and contribute to a Series 1.
Ross Taylor made 181 not out yesterday in that quite extraordinary chase, 2-2 in what is a fantastic series between a very evenly matched England and Black Caps team. It's a best of 5, so the fifth and final game is the decider in Christchurch on Saturday. What a cracker that will be. So much feedback on EQC tonight. We're going to deal with the people from Christchurch who are still getting in contact with us, but Catherine was one of the people that we played to Sid Miller, and this text has come in. Catherine, after hearing your EQC experience, I too am ashamed of our country. You sound utterly traumatised, and I know you're not alone. Fix Christchurch. They have endured too much, says Helen, we must address this, say EQC. They were saying this 4 years ago and still people come on air desperate and traumatised. For crying out loud, I am also embarrassed to be considered a New Zealander, says Lynn. So much feedback coming in along those lines. People in Christchurch, if you sometimes wonder whether the rest of the country has had a guts full of hearing your stories, well, our texts tonight suggest they are very much behind you. It's 6 o'clock.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The head of the EQC says he's had legal advice that Fletcher Construction is liable for substandard repair work following the Christchurch earthquake. The Earthquake Commission is facing more than 1,000 cases of botched repair work carried out in the aftermath of the quake. 316 cases have gone to court, 58 in the District Court, 257 in the High Court and 1 in the Court of Appeal. Fletcher's maintains it has no liability because of an indemnity clause in the contract it signed with EQC. But the Commission's Chief Executive, Sid Miller, has told Checkpoint his lawyers say otherwise.
I've had legal advice, and the advice that I've received is that Fletcher's do have a liability. You know, Fletcher's were operating a project management office. We had the relationship with the contractors. Their obligations around running the project management office, I want to understand that a lot more and what the legal ramifications of that are.
Sid Miller says EQC is now considering its legal options. Flood barriers have been deployed in Whanganui as a precaution, and a watch is in place for the Manawatu River. The Whanganui River is expected to peak at more than 10 metres within the next half an hour, and the Regional Council says a watch on the Manawatu River will continue overnight. Further north in Whakahoro, 120 tourists at Blue Duck Station west of Raurimu are trapped overnight by slips. Meanwhile, in Hawke's Bay, heavy rain has caused flooding and 200 people were evacuated in Eskdale, north of Napier. Hawke's Bay's emergency management's Ian McDonald says people were evacuated from a boarding school and a few houses after an overnight deluge. 90 millimetres of rain is due to fall in the next 7 hours, but it's not expected to cause further big evacuations. Civil Defence is urging residents in the Hawke's Bay settlement of Eskdale to stay alert to the risk of more flooding, which prompted 200 people to evacuate this morning. The head of Hawke's Bay Emergency Management, Ian McDonald, says 2 or 3 properties have been flooded, but there may be more the council doesn't know about.
We had about 300 millimetres of rain, with 150 of that falling in just 2 or 3 hours. So we had some what I'll call flash flooding this morning, but through the day the rain has dropped off. So the river's dropped in level over the last hour or two, dropped by about 2.5, 3 metres.
Ian McDonald says up to 90 millimetres more rainfall is due before 1 o'clock in the morning, but it's unlikely to cause further major problems unless it all comes at once. He says residents should keep their bags packed just in case. Meanwhile, tropical cyclone Holla, which is currently a Category 4 storm, is expected to intensify to a Category 5 within the next 24 hours. Holla is now moving away from Vanuatu in a southwesterly direction, but will curve to the southeast. At its centre, Holla has winds of 165 kilometres an hour, but this is expected to increase to 205 kilometres by Friday morning. An Auckland woman missing for more than a week has been confirmed as one of the bodies found at a Grey Lynn boarding house. The police say they've completed the post-mortems for 39-year-old Tanya Elwood and 36-year-old Timothy Kerr Hamilton, who were found 2 days ago. The police were called to Dryden Lodge on Tuesday after 2 bodies were found in one of the rooms. Residents say Miss Elwood and Mr Hamilton hadn't been at the lodge for very long. The police say the pair knew one another and they're not looking for anyone else in relation to their deaths. They say they're still piecing together what happened. A Department of Conservation manager says areas of the Abel Tasman National Park coastal track might have to be moved inland. Andrew Lamison, who heads the department's Golden Bay office, has told Checkpoint slips at the northern head of the park have closed the track there and forced a rethink on future management. He says geotech reports link the slips to the storm surge generated by Cyclone Fahey about 6 weeks ago. Mr Lamison says there are limited resources to fix tracks damaged in this way.
So we've got to think, how are we going to sustain this track? Where do we have to be prudent to move away from the coast? What areas do we have to say, listen, we actually can't access that anymore, and change the opportunities?
A dock manager, Andrew Lamerson. The department currently spends about $800,000 a year on huts, tracks, campsites and maintenance in the Abel Tasman National Park. The notorious conman Loisos Michaels, who fleeced people of more than $3 million, will get his get-rich-quick schemes, will be freed from prison in May and deported to Australia. In 2012, Michaels was sentenced to 8 years in jail after being found guilty of 30 fraud charges. He managed to con casino executives and even tried to take in the late All Black great Jonah Lomu. The parole board today approved Michaels' release. A full written decision will be available soon. It's 6:05. The New Zealand women's cricketers have secured the one-day series against the West Indies after scoring an emphatic 8-wicket win in the second match at Lincoln. The Windies were bowled out for 194, with the White Ferns chasing down their target with 19 overs to spare. Captain Susie Bates batted through the innings to be left unbeaten on 101, while Sophie Devine made 80. The third and final game is at Hagley Oval on Sunday. The All Blacks and Hurricanes' first five, Beauden Barrett, will chalk up a century of games for the Super Rugby franchise when they play the Crusaders in Wellington on Saturday night. The 26-year-old brings up the milestone with brother and fellow Hurricane Geordie alongside him, and with his brother Scott lining up for the Crusaders.
Growing up, I remember Dad playing for the club, so it was always a dream to play our game for the Hurricanes, and for it to be my 100th this weekend is very special, and my family will be there. We've got Scott there in the opposition, so it'll be a great family occasion.
Beauden Barrett. Meanwhile, All Black flanker Matt Todd returns to the Crusaders' starting lineup for the game, having recovered from a thumb injury. Manchester City have advanced to the European Champions League quarter-finals, but Tottenham are out. Italian club Juventus beat Spurs 2-1 at Wembley to go through 4-3 on aggregate, while City progressed 5-2 on aggregate despite a 2-1 home loss to Swiss champions Basel. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Eva Radic has some sweet sounds from the world of classical music. Alison Balance is up to her knees in mud, checking the health of the Monaco harbour. And the chemist Andrea Sella tells the story of phosphorus and what that element has to do with war, workers' rights and boiled urine.
And on Lately at 10, we'll have an eye on books, music, people and politics. And of course, we'll be there for the breaking news stories as they happen. We're live and we'll be keeping you up to date with the world, talking to some of the people who have made the news or are just worth talking to. That's Lately with Karen Hay on Nights with Brian Crump on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, including Coromandel Bay of Plenty, Taupo, Taumaranui and Gisborne. Fine spells and scattered showers today with possible thunderstorms. Mainly fine tomorrow, but rain about Gisborne. Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa, rain with heavy falls and isolated thunderstorms in Hawke's Bay, easing to showers tomorrow. Taranaki to Kapiti coast, including Taihape, scattered rain, some heavy north of Manawatu, becoming confined to Taihape tomorrow afternoon. Wellington, occasional showers. Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine. However, occasional rain about the Sounds and Golden Bay today. Bulla to Fiordland, fine apart from showers in northern Bulla tomorrow. Canterbury and the Kaikoura coast, cloud increasing and showers developing tomorrow morning, easing in the afternoon. Otago and Southland, fine spells. A few showers spreading from the south this evening and tomorrow morning, clearing tomorrow afternoon. The Chatham Islands, rain easing to showers tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks very much, Katrina. As revealed at the top of the program tonight, EQC boss Sid Miller says he's had legal advice that Fletcher Construction could be liable for substandard repair work following the Christchurch earthquake. He also told us 316 cases have gone to court, 58 in the District Court, 257 in the High Court and 1 in the Court of Appeal. 316 cases against EQC. This morning, Christchurch Central Labour MP and insurance lawyer Duncan Webb held a drop-in session to offer advice to people grappling with the Earthquake Commission and insurance claims. Dr Webb had initially arranged to hold the meeting in a room that seats 8, but some extra chairs and a bigger space were arranged when 40 people arrived at his electorate office, ready to vent their frustrations. One of the many but recurring issues raised by homeowners at the meeting, botched repairs and underscope damage by EQC. We've been talking so much about that underscoping. Here's our reporter Maya Burry, who was at the meeting.
Homeowners in the packed room competed for the time of Duncan Webb, asking to have legal points clarified and seeking advice on how to progress their insurance and Earthquake Commission claims. While RNZ News was asked not to film inside the meeting, several homeowners described their difficult situations afterwards. Bob Mantai says his house was fixed by EQC in 2012, but it was later discovered the repairs to the foundations hadn't been done properly. He says 18 months after he called EQC to ask for his house to be re-inspected, assessors finally came over and reached this conclusion.
They found that, yes, there was defective repairs, deficient repairs, faulty repairs, and work that had never even been done. So the original scope wasn't adhered to, was faulty, and the estimate in February 2017 was up to $215,000, which sent us to Southern Response.
Mr Mantai says he's now having to go through the claim process all over again, when this could have been avoided if EQC had properly assessed the damage to the house in 2011 in the first place.
Well, apart from being frustrating and annoying, I'm just enraged that people like ourselves, but even more, other people who have had far worse things happen to them, all because of incompetence, crookedness, dishonesty, that we've gone through a process that could have been remedied way back in the beginning if they'd done the job properly.
Another homeowner who didn't want to be named said the EQC repairs to the foundations of his home had also been botched, and he was trying to get the work redone. He says the builders subcontracted by Fletcher Construction, who were responsible for the management of the Canterbury Home Repair Program, did a quick and dirty job.
They employed builders that did a shoddy job, so we've got a scope of repairs, and I think 90% of the repairs they did are all falling apart. Oh, it's frustrating, you know, like when you get to my age in your 50s and you've worked hard and the only asset you've got in your whole life is your house, and sitting in it now, it's valueless, you know, it's a piece of junk, and there's no way we could put it on the market.
The term onsolds was coined in post-quake Canterbury to denote people who have bought homes not properly repaired by EQC, who don't qualify for a full payout from their insurer. A homeowner in the situation, who also didn't want to be named, says about 6 months into living in the house, she started noticing some defects in the repair job.
Basically, we're now at the stage where it's going to cost totally over cap to repair it, and the insurance company doesn't believe they're liable for the additional portion over the EQC cap. We'd be really keen to repair it, but we can't afford to pay the extra money over the cap, and we don't want to be stuck in an unrepaired house.
Labour MP Duncan Webb advocated for an EQC inquiry as a lawyer before he entered Parliament last year. After the meeting, he said he wasn't surprised by the issues raised.
We've known for a long time that there were serious flaws in the Canterbury Home Repair Program that was Fletcher managed, and a lot of that's coming home to roost. So, you know, and EQC is working hard to revisit all that, but we know it's a big problem.
Duncan Webb will hold another drop-in session next Friday. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Maya Burry.
So much feedback coming in. Much of it is long and personal, and we will give you a call, but this is a really telling representative sample. It's from Jessica in Christchurch. We are in a similar position of having repairs done to our house, re-repairs. Hearing these stories makes me feel outraged, but also helps me to feel not so alone in feelings of anxiousness and despair. The word is lack of trust. Our engineering report says one thing, there says another. I have lost sleep, and those feelings of apathy are just boiling away below the surface. I want to run away, but I am stuck waiting. The earthquakes were bad enough, but this is worse. Thank you for your feedback tonight. The explosion in Freedom Campus has reached a crisis point. That's according to Dunedin Mayor Dave Carla, who was one of more than 30 mayors from around the country to meet with Tourism Minister Kelvin Davis in Wellington today. The government's hoping calling them responsible campers might help, and it's set up a working group to figure out what else can be done. Laura Dooney reports.
French tourists Julian Peris and Julia Tamprino like to make pancakes every morning as they make their way around New Zealand in a self-contained camper van. Parked up at Evans Bay Marina in Wellington, they say you can't camp like this in France.
By the beach, all the coast, all the way by the coast, it's so easy because you have just beach with shower everywhere.
In the cities, there are public toilets.
Yeah, everywhere. Everywhere. Yeah. It's not a big deal, finding toilet. Yeah, this country, it looks like it's made for people like us.
Anna Zamira and Christian Bildhauer are parked next door. The Germans say they've seen freedom campers at Lake Pukaki doing exactly what's riling up locals.
You see people like doing their dishes in the lake or having a shower, and it was especially the people who weren't self-contained. The campground was for self-contained only, but there were so many non-self-contained cars.
In the past decade, the number of international visitors camping for free has jumped from about 30,000 a year to 115,000. Local government New Zealand President and Dunedin Mayor David Cull says the issue has reached a crisis point. Locals aren't happy either. At one of Dunedin's freedom camping sites, Ocean View Reserve, most say it's time for the government to intervene.
This is our home. This is where we came to live here because of the sea. And what do you get? A gypsy's caravan site. And that's what we've had now for nearly 2.5 years, I know.
You come here at 7:30 in the morning, there can be maybe 7 rows of cars over there. A lot. And a big queue for the toilet. And I know what it's like because my dogs have rolled in stuff that on the beach that didn't come out of the horses.
Well, they're not doing anything. They're just sleeping, you know. It's cool. It's colour. Bit of a bloody, what do they call it, first world problem, isn't it?
Dave Cull says mayors want to see a consistent national approach to the issue and to have the ability to set their own rules. The Freedom Camping Act of 2011 was introduced to help cater for the tourists coming here for the Rugby World Cup, allowing people to camp for free in any local authority area. However, in some tourist hotspots, councils have had to pass bylaws to prevent areas from being overrun by campers sleeping in cars and vans. Rotorua Mayor Steve Chadwick says she foresaw the problem when the law was changed.
That just issuing penalties isn't an answer here to managing freedom camping. It's not freedom camping anymore. It costs local communities, it costs neighbourhoods in terms of the violation, the public health issues that they're facing.
When it comes to putting in things like toilets or showers, Dave Cull says user pays could be the solution.
If the visitors are using the facilities, then we have to have mechanisms to ensure that they contribute to the cost of them. There are various suggestions around the country from various councils. It could be a tourism levy at the border, it could be a bed tax in a certain place, it could be a fee for entering, all sorts of ways.
Dave Cull says there's no silver bullet, but a central government and local government approach is the way forward. Back at Evans Bay in Wellington, Anna Zamira and Christian Bildhauer say extra charges could stop them seeing some of the country's attractions.
And if we save money with the campground and be responsible, it's great for us, so we can enjoy museums and stuff or some sites that are quite expensive.
But someone is having to pay for those freedom camping costs, and mayors argue that a balance has to be struck between encouraging tourists and making sure they can be accommodated properly. For Checkpoint, Laura Dooney.
Dozens of angry Littleton port workers marched on the Christchurch City Council today in protest at the port turning away union members who arrived at work this morning. The Rail and Maritime Transport Union's 201 members were planning to go on strike today but delayed it following last-minute mediation yesterday, saying progress is being made. But they say the move to lock out 70 cargo handlers, which the South Island's largest port denies, will only make the situation worse. Logan Church was at the protest.
60 furious port workers wearing high-vis vests and holding banners today took their battle with Littleton Port to the offices of Christchurch Council, which owns the company. The union says at least 70 cargo handlers were told they would not be paid if they turned up to work this morning. It has been locked in a long-running dispute with Littleton Port over the terms of a new collective contract. Rail and Maritime Transport Union organiser John Kerr says a settlement was almost reached yesterday and strike action, planned for today, had been delayed. And Mr Kerr says today's alleged lockout, which he claims is illegal, is only going to inflame the situation.
We made huge progress yesterday. Yesterday morning, this dispute was all about safety. By yesterday afternoon, we were in the whisker of getting a deal. We were a little bit apart on the money. By our calculations, it was around $200,000 a year between what they're offering and what we're asking. So our members are really disappointed. We're prouder for being a negotiating union, and the fact that the company seems to have locked them out is very, very disappointing.
Among the protesters was cargo handler Brian Gilkison, who says simple steps, such as high-spec safety helmets, could make the port a safer place to work.
Took over a year of lobbying to achieve some blocking containers that are designed to keep us out of unsafe work areas. It took over a year of lobbying to achieve higher spec safety helmets. They're still not in place. They're being dribbled in under the guise of frugalness and expense.
The protesters presented a letter to the council's chief executive, Carleen Edwards, who would not comment today. In a statement, Christchurch City Holdings, the council-owned company that owns the port, says it would be inappropriate to intervene in employment negotiations. But the port's operations manager, Paul Monk, says there is no illegal lockout. He wasn't available for an interview, but said in a statement that the union is not acting in good faith.
Our wharves are empty today, but they still want its members paid. The Rail and Maritime Transport Union is not acting in good faith. It is also misleading for the union to describe the situation as an illegal lockout. Only 25 of its 201 members are not needed to work today and will not be paid. There is no lockout of the union's members by Lyttelton Port Company.
Paul Monk says the union knew that if it withdrew its strike notice with fewer than 7 days' notice, there would be little work as the ships had already been diverted. But John Kerr says there is another explanation.
We gave them over 30 hours notice of the withdrawal of strike action, and we've given them up to 4 days notice of the withdrawal of strike action going into early next week. And yet the company is still sticking to its position that it can't divert shipping. Shipping gets diverted all the time because of weather or mechanical reasons. It's not that they can't give these people work, it's that they don't want to.
John Kerr says since the protest, he has been contacted by the port, which says it's exploring options to divert some shipping back to Lyttelton, and there might be some work available in the coming days. However, strike notices are still in place for 13 days from next Tuesday. In Christchurch for Checkpoints, Logan Church.
Just want to say again, Logan shoots, edits, scripts, reports, does everything himself, and you're a fine young man, Logan Church. The Department of Conservation is fighting a losing battle repairing tracks eroded by the sea in parts of the Abel Tasman National Park, one of the country's most visited spots, of course. This year, the sea clawed away the northern edges of the world-famous coastal track, closing it to hikers, and now DOC says it's going to have to permanently move parts of the track inland in order to keep it open. Our Nelson reporter, Tracy Neal, has this story.
More than 250,000 people are expected to flock to the Abel Tasman National Park this year alone to enjoy the golden beaches and coastal native bush. The head of the region's Economic Development Agency, Mark Rawson, says it's become Nelson Tasman's main tourist magnet.
The number one reason why people come to the Nelson Tasman region, particularly for international visitors, is Abel Tasman, by a considerable margin.
What sets the park apart is the 60-kilometre walking track that hugs the coastline from Maraho in the south to Wainui Bay in the north. And that's also what makes it vulnerable. A DOC manager, Andrew Lamison, says geotech reports link the slips to the storm surge generated by Cyclone Fahi 5 weeks ago. He says a rethink is now needed on how to maintain tracks that are at the mercy of the sea.
There is no limitless bag of money, so we've got to think, how are we going to sustain this track? Where do we have to be prudent to move away from the coast? What areas do we have to say, listen, we actually can't access that anymore?
The storm surge also came too close for comfort to properties in Torrent Bay, an enclave of privately owned batches and homes midway into the park. Tim Mackay's family has owned a place there for close to a century. He says some are now talking about raising buildings closest to the beach.
A lot of places got a lot of sand through and water. I think it's going to be an ongoing and increasingly serious problem for the Bay, yes.
DOC's Andrew Lamison says it will likely mean part of the track near the northern head of the park will be moved inland.
We did something similar at Awaroa. We recognised that we're losing land in the front there, so we shifted that up onto the hill. The outcome is it's probably some of the best views in the Abel Tasman now, so we're hoping that we can achieve something similar to Anapai.
Wally Bruce has been running guided tours on the track for 7 years. He says DOC's plan for the north of the track is disappointing because tourists expect to be able to reach the top end of it. Mr Bruce says he pays hefty concession fees to operate in the park and thought they were meant to help cover repair costs.
I respect what Doc is planning on doing, but I think there's a short-term goal, and that would be a temporary track around the slipped areas, and that Doc could put you there at your own risk.
Andrew Lamison says it's not that simple.
And it looks to the untrained eye like, you can put a little track through there, you'll be fine. On one of the slips, yes, but on the second one, we have what's called a gantry walkway or bridge that's on very unstable ground, so much so that we've tied that bridge to a tree, and we're hoping to get a heavy lift helicopter and take that apart and take it out completely.
Doc spends about $800,000 a year on tracks, huts, campsites and maintenance in the Abel Tasman National Park. In Nelson for Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
Some beautiful pictures there. Could thousands of prefab homes help solve the country's dire housing shortage? A construction and building company is trying to convince the government they're the way to go. Prefab NZ's report on New Zealand's capacity to construct prefabricated buildings says the industry could build 7,000 or more prefab homes a year. But there are worries that prefabs are a risky proposition and there may not be enough firms who want to get involved. A housing reporter, Eva Corlett, has been looking at this.
More than 250 economists, construction and building groups and designers met in Auckland to discuss how prefabs could be used for a quick boost to the country's housing stock. The government's Kiwi Build scheme aims to produce 10,000 homes a year for 10 years to address the undersupply of housing, and Prefab NZ's chief executive Pamela Bell says they'd be cost efficient, warm and high quality, and the local industry is keen.
It's really heartening to see that New Zealand's off-site construction sector are looking to reinvest 8% in order to meet the Kiwi Build targets. This looks like a 140% increase in their scale over the next 3 years, which is how we'll be able to hit that 7,000 units.
Ms Bell says that about 70% of the homes could be made off-site, and there is no limit to what can be created.
It's a manufacturer approach to construction, and it is the way that the world is moving in order to be more efficient with resources, more efficient with staff, and more efficient in producing a better productivity and a higher quality dwelling.
Ms Bell says for the industry to really hum, there needs to be strong demand for the prefabs, smoother regulation and better bank finance. Economist Shamubil Yakub says there is extraordinary risk investing in prefabrication.
Prefabrication is a very expensive business. There's a huge upfront capital cost. And if you're not selling at a high rate, and if you get those big swings in highs and lows, it can be the make or break of that business.
But Mr Yakub says prefabs may be the only way to construct the 30,000 houses per year New Zealand needs.
With Kiwi Build, at least we have some ambition to build houses. I think if we want to be realistic about building houses and we want to build them quickly and at a good standard, prefabrication is the only answer.
Mr Yakub says it's up to the government to take away some of the risk for investors. The Minister for Housing, Phil Twyford, says prefabs are an opportunity to build affordable, quality homes quickly. He says the government can make the industry attractive to investors by offering contracts for hundreds or thousands of homes over several years to give firms some certainty. And he says off-site manufacturing also gets around a major construction industry problem.
We don't have the workforce and the numbers to allow firms to scale up to meet this demand. And because when you're building a house in a factory, the workforce needs are very different. You don't need quite so many skilled tradespeople on site because you're using technology and automation.
Phil Twyford says prefabs won't be the only way Kiwi Build homes are constructed, but will make a difference to productivity and scale. He says working with experienced international companies is an option, but growing the New Zealand industry remains the priority. Mō te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Eva Corlett, tēnei.
We've had so much feedback tonight on Christchurch. A lot of people are contacting us with their stories and saying they are still a work in progress. Those of you who have sent us very personal emails or texts, we are going to give you a call and talk to you about your work, about your experiences. Thank you. So I won't read that stuff out on here, but I think the really interesting thing tonight is how many people we are hearing from who are not in Christchurch, just expressing solidarity, sympathy, empathy, compassion, and all those lovely human qualities. So if you're in Christchurch and listening, by golly, there's a lot of people contacting us tonight expressing support with you. Also, people talking about freedom camping. I'd love to hear a freedom camper respond to the question of charges in a campground. At $10 a night for a 4-week holiday in New Zealand, it would add a paltry $280. Utterly affordable, especially spread between all the travellers in one vehicle with foreign exchange rates. If travellers can afford the airfare to New Zealand, says Tanya. Lots of people just saying, actually, what do we get from freedom campers? Where am I, Colin? Am I on the wrong camera? No, I'm on the right camera. Goodness gracious me, it's middle age, ladies and gentlemen, the modern world. Anyway, thank you so much for your feedback tonight, and those of you who've been very kind about the Christchurch coverage, we really appreciate you being with us. We'll be back tomorrow at 5.
RNZ news headlines at 6:30. Flood barriers are up in Whanganui, with river levels expected to rise up to 10 metres, and there's also a watch for the Manawatu River. Heavy rain warnings continue in parts of the North Island, and residents of Eskdale and Hawke's Bay are at risk of more flooding after hundreds were evacuated this morning. About 80 people have protested at Parliament against the new TPP agreement due to be signed in Chile tomorrow. Missing woman Tanya Elwood has been identified as one of the bodies found at an Auckland boarding house 2 days ago. Littleton Port is rejecting claims by the Rail Maritime Transport Union that it's illegally locking out workers. And the New Zealand women cricketers have secured the one-day series against the West Indies. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Laurie Anderson is a woman who likes to tell tales, and I've quite a